I can start to show some of this off right now. So as you can see, we're sitting here just at Edinburgh. So I'm going to just quickly move up to the screen just to show you the terrain radar. So if I turn the terrain radar on, you can see that there's a scan pattern that has to come back and forth, and we'll leave this on. You might say it looks a bit funny because it's kind of a blocky shape, but that's exactly what it looks like in the real aircraft. And it will also rescan when I zoom back out now. So what we'll do is we'll quickly start to move off and fly this departure. Now, this is a departure that previously definitely wouldn't have been flown quite right, because we did this as part of our debugging and checking. There's a lot, I'm not going to go too crazy into details, but there's a lot of complex things going on, different types of waypoints, different types of sequencing, but let's see if it works. It should do, because we spent a long time doing it now. Some other changes while we do the takeoff is there's been a small adjustment to the rotation logic of the aircraft. So it's now a little bit easier to rotate, because before you needed quite a bit of stick to get it off the ground. As we've mentioned in the past, that we have a rotation law, so part of the fly-by-wire on the Neo, but it's been adjusted. So you'll see that in just a moment. And also a bit of an adjustment has been made to add a little bit extra power to flex takeoff. So some people were saying that D-rated takeoffs felt a little bit slow, and hopefully now you can see it that they do seem a little bit more in line with what people would expect. Mm-hmm. So now you can see the rotation is quite a bit easier than before, more realistic and better handling. And I'm just going to be a very lazy pilot and immediately engage the autopilot, as you always do, and put the gear up. And you can start to see this terrain radar. I'll zoom in a little bit, scanning its pattern, showing the terrain around, and it even shows you the highest terrain that's available in the area next to you. We probably won't have time to get to this, but the other feature that I know people have been requesting is the radial in feature. Now that is implemented now. So you can actually fully extend your center line and use the radial in. These were some of these key features that people wanted to see, and now they should all be in the simulator. And I'm just going to quickly go a bit closer so you can start to see how smooth the aircraft rolls. So that's something to pay attention to. So before it was a little bit, jerky is the wrong word, but it was a little bit more hesitant to roll quickly. And now it will do a very smooth correction as it comes onto these tracks and paths. So I'll just leave the camera here so you can see that in the background. There we go. So nearly there. As you can see, 2 miles to go, but you'll notice something. The aircraft will actually start to turn now before it reaches the waypoint, so that it's already banked, ready for the turn. Now, all these are brand new features that were not seen on the older builds of the aircraft. So it should, if I'm right in saying, shortly start to do that. So it's now you can see it's starting to turn half a mile before the waypoint, but it's doing it so it can do a very nice gradual bank. And now it's already on the bank that it needs, and it just continues round the departure. And they're really the main highlight features that we've added to the 320neo.
I think there's some good questions in the chat, Cameron.
Okay, let me just have a look.
I saw one that was, how does the A310 compare to the A300? Which you have this awesome A300, of course.
Yeah, the A310 versus the A300. There were some things on the A300 that we put in sort of that were a little bit too intensive to share across all the different platforms. So the A310 it's been improved and updated to a good standard, but with the A300 there are a little bit more elements that kind of aren't good for sharing across all the different platforms, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And then people are asking about performance.
Yes, we did also work on performance as well with the 320. So we've reviewed some of the code, and you should be seeing better performance on the 320neo on the latest build as well. Even with all the terrain radar, everything else added in, you still should see better performance.
New question: will the A320neo with PW engines be implemented?
That's something I don't actually have an answer for. Maybe you can speak to that a bit better.
So not in this update, but we are discussing this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's not a firm plan yet, but we heard the feedback.
Mm-hmm. When will Avionics Update 3 be released?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be somewhere in probably mid-September. We need to just make sure that everything is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But it's whatever, a few weeks from now. I think 2 of the aircraft are actually signed off, so we're still working on some PC6 stuff, and we'll make sure that everything is great before we put it out.
Is maybe a question for you, Cameron? Is the A320neo more stable to land in high winds?
That's coming back to is actually kind of an interesting point. So we haven't adjusted that because this is my personal experience on the aircraft as well. We are using a lot of the new CFD technology, which makes the aircraft feel quite a bit more reactive to the weather. And I wouldn't necessarily say that's wrong. I would just say it's different to a lot of other aircraft that you may have flown, but the handling is accurate compared to the real world, because it can be in high winds quite a tricky plane to land, because you can end up oscillating back and forth from yourself effectively. So that hasn't been adjusted, but that's not because we don't feel that we didn't want to put the time into it. We just feel what we have now is an accurate representation.
A couple more questions. Is the A320neo, will the wing model be improved?
That's something that we're looking at as well. Obviously, it's a bigger piece of work because you have to remake a large section of the aircraft that's also fused in, you can imagine, with the fuselage, but it's something that we are looking at, yes.
Awesome.